Alright, so this is going to be part 1 to what if Asta was a Norse god. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro. Alright, so before we actually get into what if, I had to set up a few things so you guys understand where this kind of what if is going. That, so I'll lay down the kind of setup for this what if. So the Norse god that we're going to pick for this what if is going to be Hod, which is the Norse god of winter and darkness. So yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce Hod. That's what I looked up at least. But there are different ways of spelling the name. And yeah, so you might have a different pronunciation depending on how you spell it. So in the Norse mythology, he is a blind god. And yeah, I don't know if you guys want that for us to be blind in this one. You guys can tell me down below, but under this assumption, I'm just gonna go with the assumption that you guys don't want him to be blind. So I'm gonna go with that for now, unless you guys want that to change. So I'll put a poll on this video. And yeah, so in this one, Asta will also have dual affinities, and what I mean by that is that he's going to have both ice, or I guess either we could call it either ice magic or winter magic, and as well as things like dark magic. So he's going to have the two types of affinities, and you guys can tell me what it should be called, the magic, since it could be like something like dark and winter magic, or dark winter magic, or something to do with ice, winter, or darkness, anything combination of any of those, right? So our story would start off with Asta being dropped off at the church, and basically when they take them in, it's pretty much normal as it is. But let's say that the kind of what's it called, I guess you would call them like blankets that they were in when they were given to the church. Let's say that Asta's actually has some Norse runes on them. So yeah, if you don't know, Black Clover has a lot of inspirations from Norse mythology. You can see this with all the types of mythological creatures such as elves and dwarves that are in Black Clover, and the other kind of references you see here and there. But I'm not going to really go into that. If you want to look that up, do that on your own time. But this is going to be the what if. So we would skip a few, or I guess we could talk about his kind of early years as a kid. In this assumption, we were saying that he's not blind in this one. So Asta, he is seen to be more physically strong than those around him, as well as faster. They're not sure why this is. It might be because of his magic, so they don't really know. But he's he is very helpful, because as you know, the church, basically their food depends on what they can grow, which is the pot potatoes. So because Asta has superhuman levels of strength even as a child, and superhuman levels of speed and stamina, he is able to help out a lot. So in this kind of farm work that he's able to do, he's actually able to help out a lot, right? And let's say that, I guess in this one, it's dependent on how, or if he would develop feelings for Sister Lily or not. But for the sake of this what if, let's just say he doesn't actually get any feelings for her, and instead sees her as a motherly figure instead of a romantic interest. So we would get to the date where Yuno would have to go to, actually, let's say that in this one, since Asta, or maybe not, he would still have the kind of same personality. Okay, so Yuno would still go in Asta's place to go deliver the letter to the other chief of the village, so that they could get supplies for the church. So when Yuno goes down there, he still gets kind of almost mugged by that drunk man, and he basically takes his pendant or his necklace and is going to use it to buy more alcohol. This is when Asta actually appears behind behind the man, and he demands for the man to give back the pendant, so that, because it's Yuno's, right? The man obviously says no, and he actually threatens to use his grimoire. Asta's not fazed by this, but instead runs towards the man and actually punches him in the gut. This actually shocks the man at what he was doing, and he actually decides to use his grimoire on Asta. But at this time, it's actually winter, and because of that, Hod actually gets a kind of boost during the winter. He actually is able to control winter and how it works. So as the guy uses his water magic, I'm not sure exactly what magic the guy had, but let's just assume it's a water magic, right? As the water would try to attack, this is when Asta would use his magic, subconsciously, and this is where the kind of water would just freeze and fall to the ground. Or if you don't like that, then the snow around him would have basically blocked the attack. The kid or the man would be surprised at this and wouldn't know what to do, since the little kid obviously doesn't have a grimoire because he's not a 15, and he was able to block his magic with no problem. The guy gets scared off and actually drops a pendant there and leaves. So Asta's not hurt in this one, but he still gives back the pendant to Yuno and basically says, that guy was a jerk. He only picked on you because you were a kid, but also because, I bet because you were we're peasants, right? So this is when Asta basically tells Yuno that he's going to become the Wizard King, right? So that in the future he could change things like this. And because Yuno is inspired by Asta, he also decides to become the Wizard King as well. So they have this rivalry back and forth. So as the years go by, Asta doesn't really know that he has dark magic at this point. He thinks he has some sort of ice magic, since he was able to do that against the man at the kind of the drunk man, right? He was able to use some sort of ice magic towards him. But as the years get past, he starts to doubt this, because he starts to notice that he's able to do things that he normally wouldn't be able to, which would be using darkness or being able to see in the dark. I guess that could be a passive with dark magic mage, I guess. Well, we don't really know, but he notices that he's able to use 2 affinities. He's not able to use them at their max at this point, but he's able to use them at a pretty reasonable amount, at least for day-to-day tasks, right? So when he asks Sister Lily about this, she doesn't really she's never seen anything like this. She says that people in this world are born with 1 affinity to magic, but it seems like you have 2. And Asta would show her the different types of magic that he has, that being ice ice or winter, and darkness, right? So Sister Lily's very impressed by this, and she says to Asta that you can be with this kind of magic, you'll definitely be able to become a magic knight. This is where Asta basically tells her that he's not going to just become a magic knight, he's actually going for the Wizard King. So Sister Lily's like, well, you have some pretty big dreams. If you have the power to back it up, then there's no doubt you can't be the Wizard King. So at this point, he'd be around 12 at it when he kind of discovers this. So we could skip ahead again till he's the age 15. And this is the day where they're actually going to the Grimoire Tower to go and get their grimoires. So Yuno gets his grimoire first, and there is a giant, light coming out of his grimoire, and it lands in front of him, and it shows that he has a 4-leaf grimoire, that being in wind magic. Asta then gets his grimoire in second after Yuno, but instead of a normal, glowing light, instead it shows 2 different types of light, that being one of a dark blue and the other one being a kind of blackish purplish kind of color. And it looks like the 2 lights are kind of fighting as if they were spirits. I'm not sure if I want to give Asta any spirits in this one, because it's kind of redundant since he is kind of divine in his own way. So as this happens, this is where the kind of two lights stop fighting and actually go into the Grimoire, and the Grimoire lands in front of Asta. This Grimoire's kind of look to it is kind of like a starry night sky with some sort of, it's like a purple night sky with some blue kind of snow at the bottom. That's the kind of cover, and it goes around the entire back as well, continuing to the back. So Asta would open up his Grimoire, and this is where you guys get to decide what the magic should be. So he reads what magic he has, and he sees that he has both affinities for magic, or he has the two affinities for both ice and darkness. So he's like, whoa, check this out, and people would see that people would see that he got a crazy Grimoire. And I think in this one, since Asta is a Norse god, his stuff would be top tier, so he would get a 4-leaf Grimoire. So yeah, after this was done, Yuno would be kind of impressed, but he wouldn't really show it, and he'd be like, if you want to, or I guess Asta would say like, look, with this kind of Grimoire, I'm going to be the Wizard King. And this is when Yuno would basically say, fat chance, because I'm going to be the Wizard King. So the two nobles are actually seeing this, and they're very angry that two peasants were actually able to get 4-leaf Grimoires, while they didn't, even though they are nobles, right? So Asta would go to his usual training grounds, which would be around the Demon Skull, and Yuno would be in that kind of same place that he is in the anime, and this is where the nobles actually come and threaten Yuno, and they threatened to get his book and burn it, right? As they're doing this is when the Chain Mage actually comes through and captures all of them, and basically tells Yuno that he's going to sell his Grimoire to the highest bidder as an art piece. So as this is going down, Yuno's trying to find a way to get out of this, and as the Chain Mage is about to leave with his Grimoire, this is where Asta actually appears behind him and tells or demands the Chain Mage to let Yuno go. The Chain Mage actually, obviously denies this and actually goes and tries to go for Asta, as Asta tries to run towards him. So he tries to bind him with his chains, right? But Asta, since he has superhuman levels of strength as well as reflexes, he's able to dodge this. And he opens his Grimoire to try to find a spell that he could use. And you guys can come up with a bunch of different spells for this what if, whether it be only ice magic or only dark, or a mixture of both. You guys can tell me down below. But in this one, since Hod has a lot to do with bows and arrows, if you know the mythology, I'm not gonna really explain it because it's gonna take too long. But he isn't a god of archery or anything like that, but his story has to do with bows, so I'm pretty sure he'd be able to use one. So in this one he's also not blind, so yeah. So let's say that he makes a kind of ice bow, and on this ice bow he shoots out a few arrows, not at the same time, but few at a time, since at this point Asta doesn't really know how to control his power. So he shoots 3 ice arrows at the person, at the Chain Mage, and only 1 out of 3 hits him, and this actually does have a lot of force and actually makes him stumble back a bit. The Chain Mage actually laughs at Asta, saying that he has terrible aim because of this, and Asta doesn't really know what to do. He thought that would have finished him off, but it didn't, and the Chain Mage actually goes towards Asta, and this actually the second time he actually does, it wraps around Asta. And at this point the Chain Mage is shocked to see how much mana this person has, because if you don't know, his chains, when they wrap around someone, they're able to tell how much mana someone has. So seeing how much mana this person has, the Chain Mage is shocked and doesn't know what to do. how can someone have so much mana but yet, not be so strong? So he thinks of taking out Asta very quickly, but Asta, using his physical strength, gets out of the bind and goes for another shot, but instead of an ice arrow, he uses a dark arrow or a darkness arrow, and this actually hits. It's slower, but it actually does hit since he is able to control it, since it isn't as fast as the ice. Because if you don't know, dark magic in Black Clover is a little bit slower than normal magic, but it is pretty strong nevertheless. So as this is going down, he actually gets hit by the arrow, and this actually pins the mage to the wall. This hits him with his this would hit him in the shoulder, just how basically he has two arrows going through each shoulder at this point, since the first one would have got his right and the second one would have got his left. So after this, the chain mage is basically pinned to the wall, and Asta goes up to him and basically knocks him out, since he doesn't really have a binding spell at this point, since he is very new to the magic. So after this is done, Yuno would get his grimoire back, and they would basically fist bump like they do. As they do this, they remember what happened to them as a kid, and remember all the good times, right? Just how they normally do. So they would take that kind of I think the 10 months to kind of train a bit for the Magic Knights entry exams, I guess, or the entry ceremonies or whatever. So in these 10 months, Asta would train a lot with his grimoire and a little bit of his physical body. Yuno would do the same, but mostly on his magic, right? Because most people in Black Clover don't really train their body, except for a few exceptions that know the benefits to doing so. So after a bit, they would get to the they would get ready to go to the capital, but at this point Asta is still having a lot of hard time controlling his magic, similar to that of Noel. So he has that kind of similar power, or nerf to his power, that being he's not really able to control it too well, but he does have that physical power to help him out. So after this is done, this is when they wouldn't get to the capitals to the capital on broomsticks, because Asta doesn't have that high control. So they would still have to go on foot, which would take a little bit of time. So yeah, eventually they would get to the capital, and they would look around the different markets to see how amazing the capital was. Eventually they would get to the entry exams, or the Magic Knights selection process, and they would go to that kind of building, I guess. There they would wait in line, and they would get their numbers. So each of them would get their kind of spots, and Asta doesn't really make too much of a scene here, since or I guess people would notice that both Commodores from Hodge Village would have 4-leaf grimoires. So a lot of people are impressed, but at the same time jealous, because that's not how the hierarchy is supposed to go. So Seke would still be behind Asta in this one, so he would notice that he also has a 4-leaf grimoire. So they would eventually go to the kind of open area where they would see everyone go around and see everyone who's there, and as well see the kind of magic or anti-magic birds that would be flying around people, right? So at this point, everyone would have a little bit of birds around them, except for Yuno. But then a weird looking kind of bird actually lands on Asta's head. This bird being Nero. So Nero does go with Asta because she senses that he's different from the others, not just because he has a lot of magic power, but he's not human. And when I say that, I mean he is, I guess what you would call it, Asgardian, or part of the Aesir. I'm not sure what you would say when you say a Norse god, but yeah. She would notice that he is not human, so she decides to stay with him. So as he's kind of like, trying to get this bird off of him, Asta runs into Yami. Yami says, kid, what are you trying to do? Are you why did you bump into me? So Asta's like kind of scared because this person looks very intimidating. So he basically says like, wow, you look like you had a few rough years. And obviously that offends him. And Yami's basically says, so you want to die? And he basically starts squeezing his head. And he starts counting down. As Asta feels this, he actually reacts and tries to get his hand off of him, which he actually successfully does. Yami is actually surprised by this, but as he could not do anything more because of the fireworks that would start off the kind of ceremony or the selection process. So they would get to their kind of spots to kind of do the different trials, right? Asta at this point still does not have control. Like I said before, he is on the same level as Noel in terms of magic control at this point. So on the kind of with the broomstick, he would fly very high and not know how to control it, causing him to fall. Yuno would then save him using his wind magic, and he would land softly. People would see this and not, would question, why would he get it for the grimoire if he can't control his magic? It doesn't make sense. So Seke thinks about this and says, it'd be a pretty good fight, or a pretty easy fight to win if he was able to do something like that. So if he go against Asta, it'd be a pretty easy fight because he can't control his power. So we could go to the other parts of the exam, this being the kind of accuracy test where they would shoot spells at a kind of target. So Asta would try to shoot, and he would miss the first time, and it would make a huge crater, and people would see this. But the second time he did it, this would actually hit the target, but it would completely obliterate it. So the Magic Knights are looking at this and they're just thinking Asta's a failure, kind of like Noel, or at least what's his name, Nozel would think that, right? So we would get to the fighting or the match, right? So we would get to the same matchups as they would be in the anime. So it'd be Seke versus Asta. Seke would do that kind of shield, kind of dome thing that he did in the anime, while Asta, he would try to use his bow. And at this point, he has a little bit more practice with it, but he's still not really that good of a shot. He would have met that, swordsman, the red-headed swordsman, like you see in the anime. He would have met him, but they're really, he would have known or would have taught him some things for swordsmanship. But Asta's not really like a swordsman, right? He at this point he's more of a bowman, I guess you would say, or like an archer. So he does pick up those skills of a swordsman, but he doesn't really put them to good use at this point. So what Asta does is what he does, instead of like going for full speed, he actually goes for full kind of power, but very slow, so it's easier to control. So Asta shoots out this kind of large arrow that's made out of dark magic, but with the ice bow. So so what he would do is that he would shoot it, and this arrow would go really slow compared to everything else in the series. It's going as fast as someone's speed walking, so it's not going too fast. And Seke's like, what is this? What's this looks like a really weak attack because it isn't really flashy. So Seke's like, might as well defend against it, since it's going to show how strong my defense is, and get, the squad leaders are going to be more impressed with that. So the arrow hits the basic shield, and this does a huge explosion of dark magic, cracking the shield and doing some damage to Seke, but not really killing him. It only not gravely, but it does injure him a bit. Basically it knocks him out, similar to how it was in the anime. And the kind of blast, since it did go a little bit further than the shield, it would have hit some things that were behind Seke, but not really too much. So Asta actually wins this fight. So we would get to the selection process, and on most of the squads, when it goes to Asta, they don't pick him because he doesn't have control over his power, and they don't really know too much of his magic at all, really. But there's someone who does appreciate what he can do or knows the potential, and that is Yami. So everyone actually doesn't raise their hand except for Yami. The other captains are shocked by this, but Yami looks like he has a lot of confidence in this pick, and he actually goes for him. And this is when Frogolion would be like, why is Yami, picking this guy? Could he see any potential in him? And he's thinking about it more and more, and because he's the only one that raised his hand at the time, this is where Asta would pick his squad because he would have no other option. Then this is when Frogolion's thinking like, this kid might have actual potential, but I missed out on him because he wouldn't have picked him because of how he can't control his power, and he doesn't know, he's too much of a kind of question mark at this time, kind of like the reasons why they didn't pick him in the first place. So yeah, with this being said, this is gonna be the end of the video. In the next part, we'll go over the kind of what's it called, Saucy Village, as well as the kind of baptism by fire. So with that being said, it's gonna be the video. So yeah,